VikesNow, Dustin Baker. We are talking about the 10-3 Vikings who play the 4-8-1 Colts in Week 15 at US Bank Stadium. But the topic of discussion, if you've been on any form of social media in the last 48 hours, is the defense and the defensive coordinator, Ed Donatel. There seems to be budding enthusiasm for the man to be jettisoned from the franchise because the defense simply is not very good. So let's go into the defense, talk about some of the little tidbits about it. So it was flying high, I'd say, from the fourth quarter of the Buffalo Bills game, overtime. Folks felt pretty good because the Vikings had just beaten the Bills. The defense played pretty well if it wasn't for a referee running into Cameron Bynum against Washington. Arizona the week before it, not bad. At the Cardinals, meh. Winning masked a lot of the Vikings' defensive follies, and now 2-2 since that Buffalo win. Everybody's finger pointing the defense because it must be to blame. The offense first head coach couldn't be him. It has to be Ed Donatel. That's where we're at, and some of that is righteous, but ultimately the entire enterprise, is accountable for O'Connell. So I want to look at the defense on the whole. Here's what they do: they play a junior version of a prevent defense all game long, and this isn't new. They didn't just start it in the last 2-2 stretch against Dallas, New England, New York, and Detroit. They've been doing it all year. They rank 32nd in yards allowed to opponents. I tweeted last night that all teams of NFL history since 1920, the Vikings' current yards allowed through 13 games is the 20th worst of all time. So that's what you're watching unfold before your eyes. That amount of yards, this isn't normal. So I think it's probably too late for it to turn into a good defense. We're in week 15. If the playoffs, are only a few weeks away, I don't think that suddenly somebody's going to have a conversation and they're going to be gangbusters. It's too late for that. Now, all you can hope is that it's serviceable, passable, not 32nd ranked in yards allowed for the last 4 games, and then hopefully the postseason. So this episode, the show of VikesNow, isn't here to say, all right, they're going to fix everything and Super Bowl homeboy. Not going to do that. There's too much tape out there by now. They would have already rectified it if it was possible. So it is what it is with the current personnel. It can improve, but I don't think it's going to be, Zimmer-ish from 2017 or 2018. Here's the deal. I touched on it yesterday during the recap of Lions-Vikings, is that the Ed Donatel defense, especially this one with this personnel, it is lousy without takeaways. If they are not grabbing interceptions or picking up fumbles from the turf or grass, the defense flat out is not good. The only thing that kept the defense afloat up until the Dallas game was takeaways. Right now they didn't have any against the Lions. That's why they lost. They rank 8th in takeaways. So you can, to a degree, they're 10-3 for God's sake. Something is working. You can give up this many yards so long as you make up for it by snatching the ball away from the opponent. And they did that, to the utmost until the Dallas game. And then it all kind of got crummy. They beat the Patriots without a takeaway. Somehow the Patriots really played a flawless game, and the Vikings somehow still won that. And then they got, 1 or 2 takeaways against the Jets. Didn't get any at Dallas, didn't get any at Detroit. Bada bing, they lost. That's how this works. If you're going to employ this philosophy, basically say, yeah, we're gonna not cover this wide receiver. We're going to give him 5 yards cushion. If you're going to do that all game, then they're going to get yards galore, especially in a modern NFL with the offense, premium. It's just going to happen. So I don't know how we got here, but this is what it's been endorsed. The only way that this defense, as it's constructed and coached, is worth a damn is if it's getting takeaways. I could end the show now and say sayonara, but no, I got more. Curiously, the Vikings defense ranks 15th in the NFL per EPA per play. And I think where that comes from is the way that it stands up and rises to the occasion, usually in the fourth quarter of games. I think for the expected points added metric, this think that matters a lot. And the Vikings, for all of their sins on defense, they do that. And you might be cynical right now, but they didn't do it against the Lions. Well, yeah, but they did it almost every other game besides the Cowboys game before that. And the Eagles game didn't really do it. But when it's crunch time, for some reason, I don't know what the mentality is, they say, all right, let's get down to business. Let's quit messing around. And they flex, and they're good. And so accordingly, they're 15th in the NFL in EPA per play. So if you look at that metric, you'd be like, yeah, not bad. But they're 22nd in DVOA. That feels more realistic to what we've seen, especially in the past 4 weeks. So by the numbers, they're not as bad as you think if you trust EPA per play as a metric. But the overall, you can kind of probably sense my enthusiasm on this team getting to or winning a Super Bowl, and you probably feel it in your bones as well, is the overall enthusiasm about being true blue Super Bowl contenders, I think, has really dipped since the Cowboys loss and then this Lions loss. I think all of us are kind of like, well, they're 10-3. They're pretty fortunate to be that good. They feel like an 8-6 team, but we'll take it. But I'm here to report it's the defense, stupid. The reason that it's gone pear-shaped in the last 4 weeks, losing to Dallas, losing to Detroit, is because the defense flat out, there isn't any atonement for ranking 32nd in yards allowed. Now, the offense hasn't been gangbusters, but it's been a lot better than what we've seen statistically and from the eye test on defense. So, as James Carville said in, I think, 1991, 1992, it's the economy, stupid, to, voters, what voters were banking on for that particular election. It's the defense, stupid. The Vikings will go as far as these corrections, assuming they're on the way, will take them. Otherwise, they're just another maybe one and done, maybe win the first game, losing the divisional round football team. So when the Colts game comes about, thankfully, that's a pretty good get-right game. Team that just got bashed by the Dallas Cowboys 54-19. They got to get right and see if they can fluster Matt Ryan. This should be a good test for Ed Donatel because Matt Ryan is one of the least mobile quarterbacks you could dream up in the lab, especially at age 36 or whatever he is now. Maybe he's older than that. This should be a game to get right on defense and try whatever you're going to try. I know a lot of you, maybe, I don't know about you viewers, but a lot of the sentiment on Facebook or Twitter is to fire Ed Donatel. And I understand where that's coming from. Get rid of him. Maybe all these Pro Bowlers you have on defense will do the thing. But I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think there's any precedent for a team that's 10-3 through 14 weeks just firing their defensive coordinator and hoping for the best. I think what they believe is the more sensible option is to chat with said defensive coordinator to remedy some of the shortcomings rather than start over and, just plug Mike Pettin in there. I guess stranger things have happened, but I think it's way too late to expect them to fire Ed Donatel. It's a conversation to have in January if they lose in the postseason prematurely and they got to start over on defense. Then we'll probably have a show about it, but I would not expect a defensive coordinator of a 10-3 team to be canned this late in the dance. So just want to get that out there. What I think is going to happen, or probably has already happened, is that Kevin O'Connell, the new commander-in-chief, I think he's going to have one of those moments that we've all, maybe just me, but I think you've all had in your work life where you get summoned into an office and they have the chat that says, here's what we need you to do. And if you can't do that, we'll find somebody who will. One of those moments. I think it came to a head against the Lions. Kevin O'Connell addressed the defense to reporters after the game and basically said that we will indeed be, trying some new stuff, or we got to get better. I think even he expressed his confidence in Ed Donatel. But I think this is the moment, because it wasn't circumvented by another fourth quarter thriller, wonky win. It was a loss at Detroit. And I think this exposed, even Kirk Cousins talked about it, that, the silver lining is that they lost. So now they can't just be like, yeah, we're fine. Now they can say, all right, this defense has got to get better. So I firmly believe that there probably was a conversation that already happened or will happen very soon in somebody's office that says, Ed, watch that tape. This prevent shit isn't working. So let's do something normal. Like, we're already going to give up 450 yards to the other team. That's a foregone conclusion. why don't we dial up some pressure and blitzes just because the way that it's going right now ain't working very well, despite the 10-3 record. So I think that is the scenario that's already happened or will happen, is a stern conversation from the boss that says, this ain't it, fix it. Otherwise, in about a month, I will go hire somebody else. I think that's what we're getting at. There's 4 weeks left to get this thing right. I already said I don't think it can be completely changed and fixed and blossom into a top 10 defense, because that would have happened by now. But thankfully for their sake, they're only 1 game away from clinching the NFC North, and they do have 4 games against pretty reasonable opponents that they can implement whatever conversation comes out of that stern office chat. You have the Colts, who are undynamic, the Giants, who are floundering at the moment, and then who knows what the Packers and Bears will look like in terms of their offense, their quarterback, in the final 2 weeks. So the good part here is they do have time before the playoffs start to, practice whatever the new slogan will be. I've been asked a couple times on Twitter about, what exactly do the Vikings do well? You're tweeting out that they're the 15th best in the league per EPA per play. And after a loss to the Lions, it doesn't seem like they do anything right. However, that same EPA per play metric, in the fourth quarter of games, they suddenly become the 7th best. When the game's on the line, they're at their best. There are only 6 teams better than them per defensive EPA. So, as your eye test has already told you, that when the game is coming down to the nitty-gritty, the Vikings defense ranks 7th best per defensive efficiency. And that matters. That's why they're 10-3. They have the 6th fewest penalties. This is not a very penalized defense, and that is a saving grace. If it ranked near the bottom, like kind of the Broncos and even the Cowboys aren't very good penalty-wise, we'd have even bigger problems. And then they're 8th in takeaways. So these are all top 10 metrics, and then they're passable. They're 15th on third down. They're not horrendous on third down, and therefore, serviceable. 7th in the fourth quarter per defensive efficiency, 6th in fewest penalties, 8th in takeaways, mediocre on third down. That has made it a somewhat reasonable, shebang through 14 weeks or 13 games. And then finally, just to conclude the chat, Harrison Smith should be back. I think the kind of the positive connotation coming out of yesterday was that, he should be ready to go. And then Dalvin Tomlinson's back. Dantzler should start to get more of a full starter workload. And you could tell how much Harrison Smith was missed last week. So I think that will be significant. But it all comes down to what chat is had between the head coach, the defensive coordinator, what philosophical items are used to fix it, because to date it's just been this total festival of we're going to surrender yards and then hope in the red zone we can flex. And I think now through 13 games, we've realized that isn't going to do the trick, especially when we start playing these titans of industry in the playoffs. All right, that's all I got. I'll be back with Josh Fry tomorrow, and we will talk about the Colts matchup in more detail. Skol, baby.